welcome you all here. I am, as you know, the representative of International Educational Development, which is also a co-sponsor of this event, so I welcome you here. The situation in Iraq is almost upside down and reversed from the situation in Arab Spring, because while the George W. Bush administration was playing around with will he or won't he, the most massive demonstrations worldwide against military action ever took place to try to stop the United States from invading Iraq. I think probably I was in 5 or 6 of them. Most of you in this room perhaps were in other ones. They were held in little countries, Nauru, to big countries, India, France, Italy, Canada, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico. There's practically no country in the world that did not have a demonstration against UN action in Iraq. At the same time the demonstrations were going on, we have the situation of what was called in the UK the dodgy dossier. That means the fake document was exposed as being what it was, fake, showing weapons of mass destruction and all kinds of other issues, the yellow cake from Niger and all the other accumulated misinformation, if not direct lies. Unfortunately, the international spring did not work, and the United States, as we know, invaded. The United Nations Secretary General referred to the invasion as illegal. Obviously, it's illegal post-charter to send your military forces to a country that is no threat to you. It doesn't take many days studying international law to know this was a violation. We have to also look at the role of the United States in other issues directly related to the United Nations, including the killing of Sergio de Mello, the High Commissioner for Human Rights at that time, sent by Kofi Annan. How is it that the U.S. forces that had supposedly secured could not prevent a car bomb from blowing up right under Sergio's window? Sergio was a longtime friend of mine, and another friend of mine was also killed in that event, and I will never, ever forget George W. Bush for that. At the same time, this event shattered any internal harmony that had been in place in Iraq. Although when I say internal harmony, I don't mean it was all sweetness and light. I do know that there were communal dissensions, but that more or less they were held in check. It also shattered international harmony on issues relating to intervening in armed conflicts. We have not yet recovered from the damage done by the United States in the invasion of Iraq, not only in terms of terrorism, counterterrorism, etc. We have hopelessly confused armed conflict law and the law of terrorism in the United States in particular, and even to the degree our Supreme Court has issued several years ago opinions on Guantanamo that completely tangle even further the law of terrorism and the Geneva Conventions. I, for one, do not particularly want to give POW rights to terrorists. The United States Supreme Court apparently thinks that that is okay. Now let's also look at the violations that occurred in Iraq during the United States military actions. The first thing to look at is, as we all know, it was called shock and awe. Shock and awe practically screams that it was an act of terrorism in armed conflict. The whole point of shock and awe was, indeed, to shock and awe the civilian population, which is terrorism in armed conflict. On a personal anecdote, 2 months ago I was literally shocked out of my mind. Let me explain the situation. It's the only time it's ever happened to me. Jet planes were having training exercises over San Francisco. For some reason, the jet planes like to go over my house. I didn't know there were training operations, but I was out in my garden. A plane went over, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is lower than they usually are, even when the Blue Angels come and do an air show with these fighter jets. They go over my house all the time. It was nothing like that, and I was really scared. I mean, I was really scared. That was way too close. What is going on? I thought there must have been an airplane that was being tracked by jets because of whatever. I didn't know. About 5 minutes later, I was still in the garden, and one came over even lower. It was so low, and so loud, it knocked me off my feet. I thought, you know, when you literally go out of your mind, you don't know what's happening. You think, oh, this is the end of the world. The aliens have landed. You literally cannot move. I was knocked over. It took me 5 minutes to get up and 3 days to recover. Imagine what the people in Iraq went through with shock and awe, day after day. You don't ever recover. The second issue with Iraq is the weapons used were not all legal. Depleted uranium weapons are illegal by operation of international law because they can't be contained to the field of battle. They last for 4.2 billion years. They're inhumane in that they cause birth defects 2 generations down the road, and they destroy the environment, the foretests for weaponry. We're still suffering the consequences of the use of depleted uranium in Iraq and will for several more generations, if not forever. There are concerns that, in fact, a lot of the what are called the Iraqi gene pool has been destroyed. Talk about genocide. Then we look at what did the military operations target? Did they target the military of Saddam Hussein? Well, they didn't when they attacked Fallujah General Hospital. They didn't when the United States targeted ambulances. They didn't when the United States targeted clinics, schools, community centers. All of these are illegal under international law. Every single one of them was a war crime par excellence. The fourth problem with U.S. actions in Iraq was almost trivializing the concept of torture with events in Abu Ghraib and elsewhere. The situation in Abu Ghraib has actually resulted, believe it or not, victims from Abu Ghraib sued one of the military suppliers in the United States who had a role in the torture in Abu Ghraib. They lost the case saying the action of torture occurred outside the United States, therefore there's no internal claim. And then the court said the victims have to pay the attorney's fees for the military advisor. This is law upside down and backward. United States law since 1980 has accepted claims against torture that occur outside the United States as long as the torture is in the United States. And it's a United States military supplier whose locus operandi and headquarters is in the United States. It will take an enormous effort to try to undo this kind of damage. And then there were the trials. The trials, for instance, of Saddam Hussein. Now, I was never a fan of Saddam Hussein, but I don't care who the person is, a person is entitled to a fair trial. You cannot carry out the death penalty against someone who didn't have a fair trial. But Saddam Hussein did not have a fair trial. Anyone who knows international law, anyone who knows the basic principles under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Articles 14 and Articles 9, knows this. Anyone who has followed the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention or any of the other procedures dealing with minimum standards for law know that that was not a fair trial. Today, when Iraqis should be getting over it, they're clearly not over it. There's more sectarian violence in Iraq now than there has been in a really long time. Anyone who's been reading the newspapers, you know what I mean. The current role of Iran in the internal affairs of Iraq is very, very troubling, particularly with the attack against the Irani Mujahideen at Camp Ashraf and the threats against them in Camp Liberty. Although many of the Kurdish people from Syria have sought refuge in parts of Iraq, even in Iraq among the Kurdish population there are differences, some of them violent. The Christian community has been under attack, the Chaldeans, etc., the Syro-Assyrians, etc., for many, many years, to the point where so many have fled, there's hardly a community left. And what is most troubling to me is that among the Iraqi people, to the degree I associate with them, I communicate with them, I'm in contact with them, I've worked on this situation for how many years since day one, actually since Papa Bush first got involved. And I regret that I see no vision for the future. I don't know what to say to you about that, except it's absolutely tragic when a country has no sense of what it is, where it's going, who it is, what it seeks, how is it going to move forward. I hate to leave you my remarks with that pessimistic note, but I think I've done my 15-minute speech, and I don't know how to end it. I simply do not know what concluding remarks I can say about the biggest tragedy, one of the biggest tragedies of the 21st century, that of Iraq. Thank you.